It's really easy to sit here and say, oh, it's being creative, or I don't know, editing skills or whatever. But actually, I think one of the fundamentals that would set you apart is your confidence on camera.
If there was a potential creator at the moment that's out there that's interested in, starting to create content, what advice would you give to them about that kind of initial process of starting and embracing the cringe, I guess?
Let go of perfect. Nobody wants to watch a video of somebody who's absolutely perfect. It doesn't exist.
What would you say are the main differences between AI UGC that you're seeing at the moment?
I think AI does have a place, but I do think it's got a long way to go to replace the human connection and the trust.
Amy, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
No, you're welcome. Really excited to have you on today to talk about your journey as UGC creator. May I say one of the leading UGC creators in the UK at the moment for what I'm seeing.
Thank you.
And I feel that at the moment there's a lot of conversation around how AI is potentially going to be something that plays a big part in content creation and more specifically UGC content creation in the future, if not at the moment, a lot of buzz around it, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
And so I thought, who better to bring on to speak to about this than a human UGC creator, a real person who's been in this space for a little while and worked with, I think, over 100 brands, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, it'd be great to kind of start off with, before we dig a bit deeper into that, a little bit about your journey and how you got started in UGC.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is a big hot topic at the moment, so it's great to be sort of pulling the lid off of it. But yeah, in terms of my journey, I worked in the corporate world for 10 years, the world of KPIs, board meetings, and during everybody's favourite time in 2020, I decided, hey, why don't I become a personal trainer?
Okay.
So we all had lots of spare time during lockdown in 2020, and part of that, once I was qualified, was I had to teach myself everything about content marketing because you couldn't go to a gym and get work that way. The only way I was going to get work was by finding people online and then finding me and me positioning myself as their go-to person to do online classes. And so I learned a lot through that. But obviously after a while, life went back to normal and that was my side hustle. And it was very difficult to juggle everything. So I stopped and then just obviously kept ticking away at the corporate job, but really missed the creative side of things. And then I would say probably a year later, I came across a video on TikTok, somebody talking about UGC.
Right.
And I realised that actually that's what I'd been doing as well as part of my fitness journey. I'd built a community online. I was working with brands, wasn't being paid for it.
Okay.
UGC didn't exist as a term then. And so I thought, hey, well, I'd been doing that. That's a great way to get back into being creative. And then, I hate to admit, I think I probably sat on that for about a year and a half.
Wow, okay.
Took no action. It eventually took a psychic on the other side of the world to get me to get started, which is a whole other story.
Okay.
And I used that as my incentive to get started. And that was autumn 2023. And then ever since then, I never looked back. To be honest, it completely changed my life once I started.
That's incredible. Yeah, the psychic reading, I don't know. I have a lot of questions around that, but that's definitely maybe for another day.
Yeah.
So one question I have there, I guess, is like, around that time, influencer marketing and influencers and creators making money in more of the traditional influencer marketing sense has been around for quite a few years, pre-COVID as well. And you kind of mentioned there how, you were already creating some content for the gym and these types of businesses. Did you think, maybe I can actually start growing an audience and become an influencer and go down more of the traditional route? Or was there a reason that you felt that it seemed you were quite early to the kind of movement that happened a few years, as a few years developed afterwards? So how did you think about that when it comes to the influencer channel versus UGC?
Yeah, I did think about the influencer channel, but with being an influencer, you're always told you've got to niche down. And at the time, I'd fallen out of love with my fitness journey, so I knew I didn't want to go down that route. And I thought, well, I don't want to niche down. If there's a way that I can create content and be creative, do something every day that isn't me just talking about whatever fake tan is my favourite that week, then that's the avenue I want to go down. And then UGC fit perfectly into that, because you don't need to niche down. And I'm sure we'll talk about that, but obviously it's a completely different playing field.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. And when you kind of then started, was there a lot of other UGC creators around, or do you feel like you were kind of quite early to the cave, and you know, things kind of grew from there?
I do think I was one of the earlier ones to jump on it. The landscape of UGC now is very different to what it was over a year ago. But there were people who started a year before me, and whoever's video I first saw on TikTok talking about it, and they would say it's changed even more. I think when I started, there were probably about 50 of us creators in the UK, and we all knew each other by name, and we'd, you know, meet up and stuff. Whereas now it can feel overwhelming how many new people are coming on the scene. It's a good thing. But it's very different now, much more competitive.
Yeah, for sure. And around that time, was there a particular brand that you worked with, or a piece of content that kind of took things to the next level? Obviously, I imagine you were creating different types of content for different types of niches, but is there anything that stands out that you remember a moment where it was like, oh, actually, you know, this could be a big career path for me, and something that kind of changed?
Yeah, I was hired to make content for American Express.
Okay.
And that was before I was doing it full time. I think I was maybe on month 4 from starting, and it changed the way I thought about it, and I think the people around me as well. Prior to that, I'd obviously thought, oh, this is great, but where's it heading? And prior to that, I'd been working with lots of little brands, but perhaps not household names. And then when I was hired for the American Express content, I think the people around me took note a little bit more. They didn't think I was just making silly little videos on TikTok. They took it a bit more seriously. And for me, I thought, hey, this is kind of major. This is a big brand. And if I can work with this brand, where's the limit kind of thing? So yeah, I would say that was a big change, more in the terms of mindset.
Yeah,
than
for
anything.
sure. Yeah, and on that point, actually, like, do you think there was any particular skills or traits that you had and maybe still have that you think, oh, that was the reason that actually some of these brands really like my content, and things that maybe now, I know that you do some mentoring as well for other UGC creators. Is this something that, that, you know, you feel are skills that it really helped at the time?
Yeah. I mean, it's really easy to sit here and say, oh, it's being creative, or I don't know, editing skills or whatever. But actually, I think one of the fundamentals that would set you apart is your confidence on camera. And that's a skill that takes longer to learn. You know, you can watch a tutorial on how to edit a video and do a transition, but to teach yourself to be confident on camera, that's really difficult to learn, and is actually something really key. If you're sat there in a video, I'm in and R-in and twitchy and all nervous, it's not going to come across well. So I do think having confidence on camera was something that I mastered quite early on, because when I was doing my content, I had no choice. And I was teaching, you know, lives and stuff. So I learned that quickly. But also in terms of more of a marketing head, because ultimately that is what we're doing. We're in content marketing. I think being able to sit back and put yourself in the mindset of the viewer, the consumer of that content, goes a long way. It's all really good being able to sit there and hold a product and say, this is amazing because, but actually you've got to think, well, what would get that person to stop scrolling, to watch this video, to then want to buy it? And those, I think, have to be the key skills that you need to start with before you go any further.
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree totally. And like, I'm getting into my content creation life at the moment with this. However, I definitely want to start exploring short form content myself for different reasons, just to kind of like work that muscle a little bit. Because I feel a really nice quote that I've been kind of living by a little bit in recent months is embracing the cringe a little bit, sometimes. Yeah. And I imagine with a lot of what you do as well, there's probably things like bloopers that you have to shoot and things that come up. Is that something that when you... if there was a potential creator at the moment that's out there that's interested in, starting to create content, I know there's a lot out there in different places. What advice would you give to them about that kind of initial process of starting and embracing the cringe, I guess?
I give this piece of advice to anyone who asks me about sort of building the confidence on camera, and also to anyone I do mentoring for. It's let go of perfect. Nobody wants to watch a video of somebody who's absolutely perfect. It doesn't exist. And the more you can show who you are, your personality, your reality, the better the content will do. And nobody's going to overthink that video of you more than you. And especially in the type of society we're in now, you'll watch a video, keep scrolling, 2 seconds later, you've forgotten that you've even watched it.
Yeah.
So yeah, sort of let go of being perfect would be my advice.
Yeah.
It's all about you showing off whatever the message is that you're trying to get across. You know, if you're doing a good UGC video, people aren't really paying attention to you. They should be paying attention to the message you're getting across and the product.
Yeah, no, for sure. That makes total sense. And alongside obviously working with a lot of products and brands that are more product led, I did notice there's a big trend in the last year or two with UGC creators working with travel brands and I think Airbnb businesses as well. Is that something that you've explored, and is that kind of becoming a big part of the industry at the moment versus more the product based?
Yeah,
brands?
It's definitely becoming more popular because who wouldn't want to get paid to travel and stay in all these amazing places? And yeah, it's something I've delved into. I've now got a drone, which helped me level up my content as well, which is nerve-wracking but fun. Yeah, it's definitely becoming more of a shift for UGC creators, but the barrier at the moment is educating those Airbnb hosts, those hotels in what UGC can offer them. Because at the moment, you know, if you're messaging, they go, no, we're fine, we've got photos of it and we're listed on Airbnb. But actually it's trying to say, hey, well, you could put a video out that could get lots of views that could convert to bookings. So I think we've got a long way to go in that niche of UGC, but it's definitely something that's taken off in the last few months. Yeah,
for sure. I'm seeing it everywhere at the moment, and especially on TikTok as well. I don't know, on both platforms, but on TikTok at the moment, I'm seeing a lot of that. And I think I actually used to work for a hotel when I was living in Dubai, working there a few years ago. It was quite early on in the influencer marketing and content marketing kind of world. And I saw how even back then, the gifting process of rooms and it kind of worked really well for the business that I was working for. So I guess things develop and change, don't they, over time. And so now it seems like, things are kind of coming into their own, which is really interesting. So I think we should get onto the juicy topic that we were thinking about discussing. It'd be great to find out from you in terms of human-led normal UGC content that we're seeing that has been at the forefront of the industry over the last few years. What would you say are the main differences between AI UGC that you're seeing at the moment? That I'm sure, I'm seeing a lot of ads that have got AI UGC now, and AI influencers obviously becoming wider spread as well. What do you think are the main differences that you see at the moment?
I think AI does have a place, but I do think it's got a long way to go to replace the human connection and the trust, especially given the fact as well, I mean, AI could get so much better than it is now. I know at the moment, perhaps they don't look particularly real all the time, or the terminology they'll use isn't particularly real, but big brands would have to mark on their content that it's generated with AI. And I think the minute people see that, they're going to keep scrolling because you lose the trust of the viewer. The whole reason that UGC works well is because you're watching somebody who could be your next door neighbour talking about how this has completely changed them, or talking about their own personal experience with something. And I think the minute you take away that human authenticity, you lose the trust of your consumer then. And I think that you can't go further than that. You struggle to build that trust again. And ultimately, if you're making a purchase from a brand, it's because you trust that brand and you trust that that product is going to help you in some way. So if you lose that, I think it's risky.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Actually, I played around with a couple of the AI UGC platforms that are out there at the moment, and it is fascinating, I can't lie, and it is weird in a way that you've got these avatars which are just clones of actual people that you can make do whatever you like, or I don't know whatever you like, but you can make them talk about your product, you can make them wear the shirt that you're promoting and talk in different accents, but there's still a tinge of like, oh, I know this is AI and I don't trust it. I don't know, that's what I get from it personally. But on the other side of things, what I'm seeing is it is a growing market and industry right now. So on the point of kind of what the advantages are of human normal UGC versus AI, one question I wanted to ask you was, do you often get brands that knowing that you're a UGC creator and it's not just an influencer campaign, they ask you, we want you to create something that's, it strikes an emotion in the audience, or is a bit more, feels more deeply personal maybe, or it conveys a particular emotion. Is that something, the types of conversations that you do have with brands versus just, okay, this is the brief, or,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, I worked on a campaign for life insurance, and they wanted you to sort of give a good example of whether you've got life insurance or not, and whether you feel it's worthwhile. And I was able to tell a story of how last year I went through a breast cancer scare. Thankfully got the all clear, but it was a very real example that made me then think, hang on a minute, I haven't got life insurance if this goes the way it could go. And so they gave me the creativity to tell my story through that. And there've been other examples of a similar sort of thing. And that's the kind of thing that you can't replicate at the moment with AI. That genuine connection, storytelling of a journey that you've genuinely been on personally. And I actually did a poll on my Instagram to get some people's responses to what they thought of AI. And it had a really good response, had, I think, close to 200 people vote on the poll. So I asked first, do you think AI-generated content will do better than human UGC?
Yeah.
Not a single person voted yes
Okay.
at this point. And then I said, would you trust AI-generated UGC? And again, not a single person said yes. And a lot of comments came back saying, we want a human connection. We want it to feel real, authenticity, that kind of thing. So until AI is at a point where you couldn't tell the difference, and even then, because it would have to be labelled that it's generated with AI, I think it would struggle to fully compete with human UGC.
That is fascinating, isn't it? Yeah. I think there'll be a lot of different parties that are interested in this space. So from your point of view, obviously being around a lot of the actual creators and the creator side, be interesting as well to hear insights in the next few months as well, I'm sure, from businesses and brands that are testing this.
Yes.
To see from their side, like, okay, how does it compare when you're taking a particular piece of UGC in a particular niche, for example? Maybe they're running ads to it, maybe they're using it organically. There's a lot of data and insight that I think could be interesting. But on this point, would you say that in the future, or even at the moment, there could be more of like a supporting aspect to UGC content with AI? Do you think like it's a direct competitor and that's it? Or do you think there is a way that actually, human UGC can utilize some of the benefits that AI brings to make it better?
I think it could play a great supportive role. And if I think back to my time in the corporate industry, AI was coming in then to help us write code, to write reports and things like that. It wasn't there to replace humans. It was there to make our life easier and things better. And I think it can do exactly the same for us. I know a lot of people who already use AI to give them prompts when they're writing scripts. It's also a great tool to have it sense check contracts that you're sent from brands and agencies. So I think it will have a great help and great benefit to UGC creators in the industry, but it's about striking that balance as to where you go too far with it and then maybe it isn't as impactful. Yeah,
for sure. I think regulations are going to be really interesting to see what comes out. It's going to be funny maybe one day where there's a random person somewhere and they see themselves as a clone in certain in ads or something for a brand, and then the brands, and then they there's legal issues and court cases. It's always eventually probably going to start happening.
Well, with a lot of, fun fact, I've been approached multiple times to be filmed for them to generate an AI version of me.
No way, right.
I said no, because you then have no control over what they do with your image and your voice and everything like that. But yeah, it's worth bearing in mind that a lot of these AI bots that you're seeing, they are based on a human who's been filmed for 2 minutes saying the alphabet, and then that's how they generate it. I'm
very intrigued. I know it's a question you can answer, but as to how they would set up the agreements for something like that. I don't know if it's something you can share, but I'm really intrigued because it's kind of like they're buying your like intellectual property or like, and then doing what they want with it. And there's people that are accepting it. But I mean, how much would you charge to sell yourself as a clone?
For me, I don't think I could put a price on it. And the offers I had were not reasonable at all.
Fine.
But yeah, for me, I don't think you could put a price on that. I think that's quite risky without the right
definitely
legalities in
that's
place.
like the next Squid Game series of some kind, isn't it? Where
oh god, could happen. But
yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. I want to chat a bit more about AI in a moment as well. But if we can flip a bit towards your process and thinking towards actually how you work with brands and like the process that you take to make sure that the content and the results that are coming out of the content that you create are impactful. And you kind of touched on it earlier in terms of a bit about kind of having a bit more of a marketing head on. From your point of view, how does that process look for when you start working with a brand? Do you receive a brief from them? Do you like to hold a lot more of the creativity yourself? How does it kind of work?
I am a firm believer that you're working together with the brand, and that should mean that you come together as equal parties. They know everything about the brand and the product, and you're the expert in terms of the content. And so working together is really key. Sometimes a brand will come and they'll say, this is a little brief that we've got some key mentions, key scenes that we want in it. That's fine. Other times they'll come to you and they'll go, we want this and that's that. That does feel a little bit restrictive. And then also you run the risk of the content not feeling quite as authentic as it should. I'm a firm believer that it should be both people having an invested interest in a discussion to say, this is what we think would work best. For me, I always do research into the brand. So I'll look at their social media profiles, get a sense and a feel of how they like to come across. I'll, of course, look at their website, their USPs for whatever product it is they want to show. And then something that I don't think many people do actually, but I will always look at reviews. So what are the customers saying about their brand and the product? Because that gives me a sense of, if Joe from Exeter is saying that it's really good, it's completely changed his back pain, etc. Well, that's something I could tap into
it's
in
a benefit,
that video.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that maybe isn't on their USPs like as a headline, but it's something that it can offer. So I'll always try and piece together all of that to get a sense and a feel of the direction we can go in. And then I'll base my content and my videos on that messaging.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Yeah, and it's something that I've seen as well working with influencers and brands and creators over the years, where if you overbrief too much and you don't leave room for, like you said, creativity or for their personality, it's something that when the content comes back, it just feels rigid and, you know, it doesn't come across correctly. You want that authenticity, which is what we spoke about. And you mentioned that, well, I know that you work with several different types of niches and categories. Do you enjoy working with any particular one more than the others? And do you see the results vary? Is there any kind of differences from niche to niche when you're actually creating the content and then the results that some of the brands see afterwards?
There can be. For me, my favourite niches are travel, and I love the app website tech-based ones. They're really good. You can do them from anywhere, and you can get really creative in your editing style because there's no physical product that you can be showing off. So yeah, you then have to be a bit more creative. And because of that, sometimes the video will do better because you've employed more advanced editing techniques that are more engaging. But it really does depend on the brand, the product, and how you weave the messaging together. If you do a good job, then there's no limit to how well that piece of content can do.
Yeah, for sure. And when you're working with brands, what do you see as the biggest mistake that some of them are making at the moment? Maybe it's brands that they come to you and you're noticing the UGC they've created before, or maybe it's brands that you haven't worked with and you're noticing some of the content that's out there that you think you probably could do better on.
I think particularly brands who are newer to UGC will go down the route of quite a salesy video. So it will finish with a go to the website today or get yours now. And I think there's a world where that mixes really well with stuff that feels very natural and organic. And it's interesting because you do see that shift. A brand who's new to UGC, all of their videos are going to feel quite in your face, like an advert.
It's quite old school, isn't it? In terms of like the call to action and the way that they're pushing people to do something. How would you reframe it? What do you see works quite well in terms of that last call to action, if you like to call it, or the objective of what the video is trying to achieve?
For me, when you're doing a UGC video, you aren't selling that 2D product. You should be selling a experience or a feeling. And if you've done a really good job of that, your call to action could just be like the final little nail in the coffin to show this is how you're going to feel kind of thing, rather than too salesy. But I do have a strong sense that videos that really don't feel like UGC, and maybe the product is super subtle in there. It could be a morning routine, but I've journaled for 2 seconds of that morning routine and I'm trying to sell that journal. Mixes really well with other content this is why you need this journal, 3 reasons why. Have a mix of it, because they have very different purposes. One is very much, this is what we're selling, this is what it can do for you. And the other one builds brand awareness and trust with your audience. And I think if you mix those two, then you're onto a winner.
Yeah, it's great advice. Great advice. And do you find TikTok content versus Instagram content, once the brand has got your piece of content and are now distributing it out, or even actually beforehand when they're briefing you and then maybe they say to you, this is for TikTok, is there clear differences between the call to action or the style of content that you create?
I would say not always. Sometimes you can do one piece of content that can be applied to 2. But in terms of TikTok, content that does better is content that's fun, more relaxed, maybe funny, skit style. Whereas stuff that does really well on Instagram is more of your aesthetic content, a bit more perfect and neat and tidy. But that's not to say that it couldn't do well on both. Ultimately, people go online because you want to be entertained. You want to be taken away from your reality for a little while. You don't want to watch something that's really boring or picture perfect that you can never achieve all the time. Sometimes you just enjoy scrolling through pictures of puppies or videos of people falling down the stairs. And so if you can make UGC feel like that, then that's what's going to do well, no matter where you put it.
Yeah, for sure. No, 100%. I was thinking about my TikTok feed just then for a minute, and I was just like, has it got puppies or what's going on there? And I guess like TikTok especially, but I mean generally now when you're thinking about creating content for different reasons, trending audio, trends generally, and looking at trending hooks and different variations in content is obviously a big conversation. Do you find that that's a conversation that you have with brands as well, up front or afterwards? And how do you integrate trends into the content that you make?
Yeah, so in terms of trends, for me, staying on top of trends, obviously I'm a consumer of content as well. I'll scroll through content in my relaxed time. So that's how I can know what trends are good. And I guess brands do the same. Sometimes brand will come and they'll want trending content, but because of the process normally of a brand scouting for a creator, setting it all up, and then by the time you get to the end of that process, the trend's probably been and gone. What does better is more original content, because that's what's going to feel fresh and brand new because nobody's done it before. There are brands that would have a creator on a long-term sort of rolling contract, and then it's quicker for you to jump on trends because you're already in a working relationship with them. I do think having a mix is really good, because jumping on trends is nice and fun for brands and again shows their relatability. But I'm a big firm believer in having some original content, stuff that's uniquely yours that you've thought of, and that's the sort of thing that isn't going to age and then come out of trend.
Yeah, for sure. No, I 100% agree as well. And I think going into this particular year, 2025, versus, obviously AI coming to fruition, I think beginning of 2023, if I'm not mistaken. Heading into this year, what do you see are going to be the most impactful things that are going to be affecting UGC for human-based creators, let's call them? And is there anything that you think creators and brands need to be a bit more aware of than previous years?
I think people are becoming a lot more aware of when they're being sold to online. So I do think there'll be more of a shift to much more natural and organic feeling content that isn't too salesy. And like I said, I think that's why it's key to have a mix. And in terms of what I think brands and creators should be aware of, for creators, we're going into a much more competitive space now. There's more and more creators every single day. The only way you're going to stand out is by showing up and being yourself, because there's only one you. Nobody's got the same personality as you. If you can find a way of getting that across, you're going to feel unique and fresh and new. And for brands, because there are so many new creators coming onto the scene, it's creating a bit of a challenge in the industry at the moment, where I think a lot of brands have got a journey to go on to understand the value of UGC. And I think they'll work with brand new creators, and the rate that those brand new creators, of course, would be different to somebody who's been in the industry for multiple years. And then they'll come to somebody who's been in the industry for longer and won't understand why the rate's a bit higher. But I would always encourage them to think back on their ROI. What do you want to get back from that video? Your return on investment is probably going to be a bit higher if you're using somebody who who's tried and tested it, knows what works in the industry, what doesn't, versus somebody who's maybe on day 2 of their journey. We all start somewhere, and I completely get that. But it's about understanding that difference for brands. And there are, at the moment, unfortunately, some brands who will come up to me even and say, this is the rate. And if you break it down to how many hours it would take me to do that content, it's not legal minimum wage. And I think they forget that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a journey in a lot of ways to sort of understand the value and what you want to get back from it.
No, that's a really interesting point, actually. Like the way that brands and creators, their relationship over the years, I feel like it's kind of like a toxic relationship sometimes, where on one side, a brand, they're looking at wanting a piece of work from a creator, but the way that they're justifying price, there isn't, and this happens in influencer marketing as well, like there isn't like a standard rate that goes for in the industry, that goes for the market. So I guess it becomes quite difficult when it comes to being able to put a price on things. Definitely in influencer marketing, we've been able to add certain metrics into the kind of equation to be able to make sense more of rates when it comes to looking at engagement metrics, maybe looking at previous sales data and stuff like that. But when it comes to the types of conversations that you have with brands, and maybe when they say to you, oh, have you got examples of, do they ask actually for examples of sales data, or is it always just content examples? Do they want to see further down the funnel, as we call it in marketing, them types of metrics with UGC?
I think it's a mix of both. So on the surface, they mostly ask for content examples, and that's why you have your social media profiles, your portfolio. But we also have tools like the ads library and things like that, where you can look at how a video's performed. You can look at the conversion rate, the click-through rate, that kind of thing. And that's what's more important to us. Obviously, some brands will focus a little bit more on the number of views, but you could have over 1 million views, but if your actual conversion rate on that ad isn't very good, what's the point of all of those views?
Exactly.
So there are different tools that definitely we now use to sort of back up our experience to say this is how well that ad actually performed. Yeah,
for sure. No, I think like putting data behind it is so important. And I'm seeing that more than ever at the moment as well, having conversations with brands at the moment where they want to see the, if it's influencer campaigns, let's say, for example, they want to see the link clicks, for example, that are happening on stories, or, the engagement metrics or sales data from previous campaigns. So I think it's an important point, probably going into not just influencers, but UGC creators as well, making sure they're on top of their numbers. And I agree with you, everyone starts somewhere, but being aware of that probably at the beginning is going to be an important point. And I guess like to summarize, would you have kind of like a couple tips that you'd give to any aspiring UGC creators that are looking to maybe get into the position that you are at the moment?
So as I've already said, sort of work on your confidence, showing your personality. But one thing that they do have going for them at the moment, if you were to start UGC, is because it isn't such a new industry, there are so many people that offer resources and tips and coaching, mentoring. That's a resource that I didn't have when I started. It was a lot of just teaching myself as I went along, and people prior to me were the same. If you are in a position where you could perhaps utilize any of those resources to further advance where you want to get to with UGC, I think tap into it. Don't be afraid of them. And there's lots of free resource online that we share in terms of our TikTok videos. Here's a tip on what to do to start UGC. Consume all of that content. It's free and it comes from experience.
Amazing. Awesome. Great. Where can people find you if they want to find you? I'll put some links in the description as well.
Amazing. Thank you. So on Instagram and TikTok, I'm ugc.content by Amy.
Amazing. Great to have you on today. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much.